everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. Want to remind everybody, please hit that like, share, and subscribe button. There's a PayPal link down there for anybody who wants to share some love. Always appreciated. And the StreamYard link is there for anybody that wants to join the panel. And we're going to be talking about indemnification again tonight. It says tailored to fit individual clients. And this is basically when you're getting involved in this legal documentation stuff, there's already a trust there. It's already expressed. Like I said, when we went over that birth certificate bond, which is a bailment, which itself is an expression of a trust. Along with that, it's issued by the commander-in-chief, which is the governor, and it's a receipt. It's evidence that you received it, and it's got a value in it through the seal. That's full faith and credit of the United States, which the commanding officer caused to be issued, and therefore the spoliated owner may obtain indemnity. And that's what we're talking about, is creation of an indemnification trust. And so before we get into it, we're going to go over a quick little video about a declaration of trust. Greetings, Russ. How you doing tonight?
Greetings, brother. Doing well.
Good. Good to have you on board again.
Absolutely. I might be in and out. I figured I'd come up and hang out with you.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Pipe up anytime.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's get into it. We've got this guy, let's see here. Oops, wrong one. Picture Us Family. So I'm going to drop this video link down in the chat so everybody can grab this, and be sure to go over and check him out. Picture Us Family, and this is a video, the Declaration of Trust, what you need to know. And this is just a simple video telling us some basics.
50 degrees today. Welcome back. Have you ever wondered how people set up trust to manage their assets? Well, it all starts with one key document, the Declaration of Trust. In today's video, we'll unravel the mysteries behind this document, why it's so important. Stick around with us to discover who creates the Declaration of Trust, what goes into it, when it's needed, why it's crucial for a trust, and how you can change it if needed. You'll get a clear understanding of how this document serves as the backbone of any trust. So we got to start with what is a declaration of trust. So to put it plainly and simply, right, a declaration of trust is a legal document that establishes the existence of a trust and outlines the terms and conditions of the trust. It is the trust instrument, right, that constitutes the trust and sets forth the rights and obligations of trustees and beneficiaries.
Greetings, Steve. How you doing tonight, brother?
I'm doing good, bro. How you doing?
Good, good.
Good to see you, Steve.
What's good?
All glory goes to him, Ramon. All glory goes to our Creator. We're going over a simple declaration of trust right now, and then we're going to get into indemnification clause. And like I just said with these guys, the principal foundation is an indemnification trust. They've already got a trust going on. So it's an equal consideration. Equity acts in personam. That's where you give consideration, is in contract form. So we're going to hopefully be able to create an indemnification trust through a declaration of trust, and then issue the instruments that we need to appropriately, acquired by receiving them from the commanding officer. That's that birth certificate bond signed by the governor and his registrar. That's a receipt issued by the commander-in-chief that shall serve the spoliated owner indemnity. So we're going to help them with their martial law, which affects chiefly the police and the collection of public revenue and taxes, by clearing out that matter.
Beneficiary. And if you're not familiar with our channel, we've said this before, but the Declaration of Trust, it outlines the intentions of the settlor and provides specific details about the trust property, the beneficiaries, and the powers and duties of the trustees. It is a crucial document in the administration of an express trust specifically. It serves as a foundation of any relationship. So who's the only person that can draft the Declaration of Trust? I'm sure if you're not, or if you are familiar with our channel, you already know the answer to that. If you are not familiar with our channel, or me, or express trust, or trust in general, the answer is the settlor, or the grantor, right? The person who creates the trust is the one who writes the declaration of trust, also known as the trust indenture, contractual indenture. It's a bunch of different terms that you can use to describe this key document. But one key takeaway that you need to know is that the settlor or a grantor is the one who writes the declaration of trust. That's not to say that a lawyer couldn't write the declaration of trust. However, there are many reasons not to involve a lawyer, such as cost considerations, simplicity of the trust, or familiarity with trust laws. It's important to weigh the benefits of legal expertise and customization against the potential costs and complexities of the trust. So
customization, because this is only going to work one-on-one. It's an individual basis. Every man needs to come forward with this. And this is the base foundation of that principle of giving a man a fish, you feed him for a day, but to teach him to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. But in that, the highest responsibility is that they turn around and teach too. And this is that redemption thing. If a man comes forward and redeems his brother of all of his belongings that he sold off, that principal ethical concept is that you don't just redeem him so that he gets his belongings back, but you teach him how the redemption works so that he can then go forward and redeem others. That's the primary duty. So in that, there are some people that we can still take under our wings in that trust as beneficiaries for that educational process. That's the intent of any trust, is the education of the next generation to carry on that trust.
In a nutshell, the language must be complete and clear so that it can be easily understood what the intention of the settlor is and what the obligations, rights, and responsibilities of the trustees and beneficiaries are. We'll get into detail about all of the things that should go into a declaration of trust or a trust indenture, but it's not going to happen in this video. It's a very long process and it needs careful consideration in its own time. So we'll get into that in a future video. So you may ask, well, when is a declaration of trust needed or a trust indenture needed? Well, a declaration of trust or a trust indenture is needed whenever a new trust is established. So every time you create a trust, which you may have reasons, or there are many reasons why you will want to operate through more than one trust. But for each one of those trusts, just know you have to draft its own indenture, because again, it's got to lay out the intentions, obligations, and responsibilities and parties involved. And that may change from trust to trust. I mean, up until this point, you really kind of understand where I'm going with this and why a declaration of trust is important, but you may not have really, you may still have the question as to why it's important. And it's been held through law that the trust is far superior than incorporating because of so many advantages that it has. I want to list like.
And what I want to point out here is that, remember, he said it's the settlor or grantor that creates the trust. And in the indemnification trust, that's saying that you're the one that's granting it. And that's the assurance. So it does, again, it avoids that insurance because the trust is expressed. And that's the importance of that expressed trust.
Everything, and it's so much, and it varies per type of trust. I'm not going to do it, but I will touch on some of the differences between a trust and incorporate. So let's get into a couple of those, and hopefully that'll help you kind of get an understanding as to why it's so superior to incorporate. Firstly, trusts are governed under laws of equity. It's the most well-settled body of law in America, unlike corporations, which are governed under statute, forever changing according to political agendas. Right? So you get someone in office, things change.
And remember, in equity, a statute cannot be used as a cloak for fraud. So anytime they're trying to use statute, they're trying to use statute as a cloak for fraud for equity, when you're trying to specifically tell them, hey, I'm talking about equity. That's trust law. Trust, again, the equity deems that the beneficiary is true owner. He gets to come in and settle the matters. Despite the fact that there may not be a trustee, he can assign one. If there is a trustee that's acting in misfeasance or malfeasance, he can dismiss a new one or settle the matters himself if he's competent, or he can use a attorney for as a matter of research and material only, not as a representation. That's a corporate fiction. You got to stay out of that corporate statute stuff. Use the contract terms in those statutes for the indemnification to give the equal consideration, but it's from a private funding and not a public funding.
Mayor, governor, whatever, senator, congressperson, things change. Your business is going to be affected by that change, but it's not like that with trust. Also, trusts are not required to have business licenses. And we already know if you incorporate, you definitely got to get a license. Trustees are not.
And that is, see, People versus Rose, Supra. I'll pull that up and drop it. There's another one he's going to drop.
You definitely got to get a license. Trustees are not required to file reports with any entity and are accountable only to the beneficiary. governed strictly under principles of equity, which is another video we're going to do soon. We got to learn about these principles of equity. I'm telling you, it'll blow your mind. We already know corporations are required to file statements and reports like quarterly. Also, trust business names are.
Greetings, Mitch. How you doing tonight?
Hey, Wiz, good to see you, man.
So we got a few here. We got People versus Rose again. We got YWCA versus YWCA. Remember, folks, all they're doing is suing a record. So we have a case here where you've got the YWCA suing the YWCA. Okay? This is the same thing that you can see some people do to get effect for that remedy in private law is Keith Little versus Keith Little. That's all we're doing is we're contesting the record. McLean versus Fleming. Lane versus Brothers. Aiello versus Montcalf. And Rudolph versus Souther. Beneficial League. Business name is naturally protected by injunction. May also use trade name or trademark for trust purposes without registration. So like I said with the local courts here, what they did was they converted that name and they're using it for their own non-registered trust purposes.
Protected by injunction, which means they can use a trade name or a trademark for trust purposes without registering it. We already know if you open up a business, you must apply for a secure fictitious name and must register all trade names and trademarks. All federal.
So what they do is they pool them, and then because they're pooled like that, now they can convert them into their name as their trust and invest in them. However, those funds still have to go back to those principals in the pool. And since they can only get a percentage, they're glad to take their percentage. And then the rest of that goes into an abandonment fund. Those credits are still there. That comes back in credits. They don't make Federal Reserve notes on them. They don't make coin on them. They get it back in certificated form, which is a evidence of an electronic record that was kept that gives it credence. That's what the credits are. Has some kind of value in their electronic system. That's it. And
So
when you go
is
ahead.
it the settler would be grant? Let's see. How was I going to? So in reality, the settler is granting the settlement of the financial of the estate.
Correct. Otherwise, it goes on as debt in perpetuity as a debt against the United States. And remember,
Correct.
folks, the estate came from mom and dad. That's the true estate. And then once you claim that estate, now it's your estate. Otherwise, your estate is actually separate from that estate, and that's what they're dealing with. They're dealing with that record that is an extension into you. And you can try to clear up your records, but you still have to take on the fact that they have that other estate that is inherently yours.
Right.
That was still left in probate. And simple inheritance law says that the father, by reason and logic of any reasonable man, would naturally pass on his estate to his son. That's the way it's been throughout history, the first son.
Federal excise tax and state organization tax are legally avoided with the trust. Legally avoided. You heard me? Are legally avoided. For a business, the opposite is the case. I mean, the list is long. I can't go into everything, but I just wanted to drop a little bit of those on you so you kind of get a starting point. Okay, so how can a declaration of trust be changed? This is a slippery slope, and it can get a little murky. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on it because when you're thinking about express trust or irrevocable or private trust, they're not intended to be changed without.
Okay, and that's not totally accurate because an express trust, a revocable trust once expressed is an express trust. So he's using an ambiguous term and trying to set it in with a group of others that can't be changed. And I think that's an error. That even the birth certificate bond as a bailment, like we found out, is an express trust. And it can be changed because it doesn't have any terms on it yet. It doesn't have that equal consideration to act in equity, which acts in personam. It's not contracted. It's got the full faith and credit seal there, but it's not contracted. And that's the thing to be contracted, not you. You are not the contractor. You're contracting the bond for its indemnification value, which is full faith and credit of the United States. It's pretty much unlimited.
Abiding by the terms set forth in a declaration of trust. Again, it goes back to the declaration of trust because that's what authorizes trustees to do or to not do a thing, right? So if you're writing your declaration of trust that the indenture can be changed.
So when you do a indemnification trust, you can assign, say you go down to the bank and you open an account with the bank for that trust, you can assign the banker as the trustee to handle all the negotiable instruments upon your directive. That directive is under 50 U.S.C. 4305, full acquittance and discharge, and that's a special direct deposit where they're obligated to give credit to the spoliated owner because he just gave that banker a receipt from the commanding officer saying so. So it sounds like a circular indemnification for them to go ahead and just do their job and transfer the credits because it's the third-party benefactor that's willing to make that third-party payment so long as it's understood, again, under 12 U.S.C. 813, where they're obligated to give credits, that the credits are given to the customer's account. So you're just releasing those credits in that birth certificate bond for whatever amount you need to go to pay the banker and yourself for that transaction. And it's a private placement, not an offering for public investment.
With 2/3 vote of all certificate holders and 2/3 of the board of trustees. Then if those parties come together and all in agreement, then the declaration can be changed. And I hate to use the word change. A proper word would be it can be amended. So that's pretty much in a nutshell how you can change. Now, irrevocable, you really have to go through a lot to change. Unlike revocable or like living trust or grantor trust, since all of the responsibility and liability rests with the settlor or the grantor of those type of trusts, he can change it or she can change it whenever she wants. But when it comes to privacy, expressed, irrevocable trust, then those are unchangeable. Unless the terms for which it can be changed are clearly outlined inside of the Declaration of Trust.
And see, that's what we talked about here not too long ago about revocable trust and irrevocable trust, is that you can create your own revocable trust during your lifetime, which is a lifetime trust, where you can change it along the way. But then once you pass on, once that testator dies and that estate is under execution now, particularly in a probate situation where the court wants to administrate it, it still has to have a directive. And as long as that revocable trust is constructed properly, that directive will be there. That's the living will, which also is an express trust. So it's just a matter of comprehending, again, that concept that any reasonable and logical father by nature passes his estate to his firstborn son. And then if there's not a firstborn son, then it goes to other means. That's where the discrepancy comes in for probate. If somebody cries out, wait a minute, I was supposed to get it. Well, again, it still goes to the testator's will. And if he decided that that firstborn son was a rotten son and decided to give it to his firstborn daughter, then so be it. That's the living will, and that's its importance in constructing that now, letting them know you are the boss, and these are my beneficiaries. You don't touch them either. That's the inherent power of that trust. You guys got anything on that before we go to the next thing?
Yeah, I got a lot because I'm trying to put myself back when I started and trying to understand this stuff because I'm really trying to define this to my family to try to get them to understand that it's such a foreign concept. You have to, if you're not in it, it's very hard to digest. It's very hard to. So I think the way I'm thinking of it right now is think of it like a 7-layer salad or baklava or something that's got lots of layers. The base layer is the C.O.W.A.R.D.S irrevocable trust. That's the base. That's created for you by the state.
Through your mom and dad.
Now your mom and dad are the ones that sign off on the creation of the trust. But the state is the one that actually goes and gets it done. So they go and now your parents sign the authorization with the registrar, and they go and get it done. And then the state jumps in and says, okay, well, we created the all cap name. That's we have interest in that trust because you are going to be a contributor to society. And so because you're going to contribute to society, because your parents unknowingly just contracted you to work for this society, that's the obligation you have to the state, whether you know it or not. And
Right. And I think before we're going further, I think the obligation is set up on the pretense that because of that enumeration at birth, folks, they do establish a burial trust. And so since they're establishing the burial trust in an imperfect usufruct, they gave you a title to that burial trust to discharge the estate, but nobody's ever taught how to do that.
Correct. And that's the so every other trust that guy just spoke about are trusts that are created by you, by the state, or by some party of interest on your name. And you may not know exactly what you're doing, but every time you enter this contracts with the state or state agencies, that's what's happening. Every time you give them that social security number, that's what's happening. So creating some level of a trust. Some are big, some are small, some are simple, some are complicated. It just all depends. But I think that's the main fundamental people just need to understand is that because to digest all of the process of this stuff is very, very difficult. And I try to explain it as much as I can, and I'm realizing that the further I get into it, the harder it is to explain. Even though you have the evidence, we've been conditioned not to pay attention to it. So I say that to say just try to keep it as simple as you can in your comprehension. Wiz has an unbelievable understanding of this stuff, and the science is very, very challenging to stay with. But it's one of those, especially with Wiz's stuff, you just got to listen to all of his shit over and over again so you can start seeing where things start to come into play. But that's kind of my only thing to the audience is to just take it slow and try to process as possible. But once you start understanding the fundamentals and be fundamentally sound, there's a lot of everything they got is all built on deception. They run the art of war like nobody else. It's all military, which is we've talked about in other discussions. But these subtleties in what they say is it's like when you listen to the gurus or the people like the David Straits or the Anna von Rices or the Moors. When you listen to them, they're right on 89-90% of what they're talking about. But one or two things are off. And it's not that they're mean or evil people. They're misguided purposefully because they want you to follow them, but then hit a dead end. So it's up to you to figure it out. And that's where your discernment as an individual, like Wiz was saying at the jump, each person has to find their own path because every state is different and how they process and do everything is different. And they all lean on their local rules. So even I'm in Missouri, even my county operates different from the county next door. So local rules are very everything. So your governance is always locally. So I just wanted to break that down, just try to help others start to understand because this shit is very complicated and don't feel like you have to have it all because if you're doing it right, you're not.
Yeah, that's why I said if we get one person that gets this figured out and takes other people under their wing and actually teaches them, that's actually the true intent of a good faith trust, is that everybody has information that is disclosed so it can operate appropriately. If one person in that trust doesn't know how it operates, that one person can destroy that trust. And that's why it's so imperative to understand that my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. We have to pass on the knowledge. That's the inherent benefit of any trust. Every word of God is pure. It is a shield on he who put their trust in God. So let's take a look at the next thing. I pulled up a page, and And I put the question, is an indemnification bond an express trust? So let's go down, and it says, what is an indemnification trust? A trustee is entitled to reasonable compensation for his services. The amount payable can either come from the trust agreement itself or be fixed by the court or state statute. And that's taking into account the trustee's skill level and actual duties performed. So as I said, if it's handed over to an attorney, they're probably going to try to use some kind of fixed agreement by a court or a state statute. Whereas if you're doing it in equity, it's you that's got to recognize the principal foundation of that full faith and credit seal and how to give a directive for those credits. Customer agrees to make third-party payment so long as the credits are given to the customer's account.
I want to say something too. With statutes, there's a statute for everything. There's a statute for you crossing the street. There's a statute for you not crossing the street. So just know they want you in statutes because they'll dictate what that is because that's their jurisdiction. And when you start to understand that common law and equity are your friend, you need to stay there and try to stay away from their statutes. It's good to know them,
right,
but just know what's a statute and what's common law.
Yep. And here it says, indemnification is a legal exemption from penalties or liabilities incurred by one's actions. This is the without prejudice, without recourse. You're not taking on liabilities. Okay, same thing. It's a legal exemption from penalties or liabilities incurred by one's actions. So what do they do when you sign a document without qualifying it properly? That incurs a liability on the public record. Okay. An accident is continuous and repeated exposure to the same conditions that place a public liability where the insured never expected nor intended. It says a trustee is entitled to reasonable compensation for his services. The amount payable can either come from the trust agreement itself or be fixed by the court, taking into account the trustee's skill level and actual duties performed or state statute. The trustee is under no obligation to accept the compensation offered. Rather, the trustee can waive compensation. Doesn't say he can waive his obligation. If a trustee is guilty of breach of trust, she or he could forfeit any previously allowable compensation. Additionally, the trustee is entitled to indemnification. So you find that trustee and you indemnify them. Same with you. It's an equal consideration. Equity acts in personam, in contract. So give them a contract indemnifying both of you. Say, hey, neither one of us really knows what's going on, but we're going to learn together. We're going to educate each other. You tell me what you know. I'll tell you what I know. That's all it is. It's not an argument. It's just giving you other objective perspectives from people that you're not used to dealing with. Benefactors. Example, exemption from liabilities for any loss if the trustee acted within the scope of her appointment and exercised the proper reasonable care in administrating the trust assets. Quid pro quo, the benefactor settler is not liable for any actions in these proceedings in equity, in private, because we're all learning. I don't know anybody that could tell me the duties of a beneficiary if the beneficiary is not actually required to do anything. Example, Robin is the trustee for a trust that contains a rental property. In overseeing the trust assets, Robin employs several people at the building who manage the property on a day-to-day basis. In addition, she regularly inspects the property herself and keeps close tabs on the workings of the building. One day, a tenant is injured in the lobby of the building. The tenant sues the building, claiming that management was negligent in maintaining the property. If the tenant also wants to sue Robin as the trustee, she would not be personally liable for any damages, since she acted within the scope of her appointment by properly supervising the actions of the building's employees and did not breach the trust duty. The trust would have to pay out any damages awarded as a result of the lawsuit. So who do you think is paying out in all these things if it's not the trustees? See, they're not being held liable. So it's coming out of the trust. Who did they establish the trust with, the victim or the perp? Probably both. Oops, another way of double dipping, huh?
There's the tenant contract for which the obligations are outlined for what they're going to do. And then there's the trustees agreement as well for their performance. So
Yep.
you have to find the breach on either contract. If you only find one, that's where they're going to do. But they're 100% indemnified, and that's what they're doing every time they're going into. They keep flipping who is the trustee when you're going to a court case. They'll flip and make you the trustee, then make you liable. So, that was the other thing on that foundational trust, the C.O.W.A.R.D.S trust. They're telling you you're the settler. You're not. Your parents are.
Exactly. That's what I was saying. You have to understand that's not your estate. You can't settle that. You can claim it.
Right. But you are not the settler. So that allows you to be the administrator and or the executor. So keep that in mind, because having that control is where I'm at.
Yep. And I think that's why it's important to let them know through an indemnification bond that you do have a certain level of control, particularly over and above them. Because again, in this indemnification setup, you're expressing that you're the benefactor, the one that's coming forth to settle those matters if they happen, and you're doing so equity acts in persona by contract form. And if you want equity, you must first come with equity. And therefore, you're doing it first and not waiting until after it happens in a lawsuit through insurance. Again, remember, even insurance is prepaid. That's all we're doing, is we're making a prepayment under full faith and credit rather than a security instrument that's going to go out there and create a debt, put a liability on the public record. So the next one is from formcpai.com. Formcpai.com. Let me drop this. And it says, indemnification, hold harmless, and liability limitation clauses. Can you use them? Indemnification or hold harmless clauses typically provide that a client will indemnify or hold the CPA firm harmless in the event the firm sustains a loss resulting from claims arising from the CPA's work. Indemnification clauses are typically intended to limit liability when client management knowingly makes misrepresentations to the CPA. And what have we been doing all of our life? We've been making misrepresentations. We didn't know it, though. Now we know the difference. Now we need to make an indemnification because we know certain things that may be taken wrong. Here's what they are. United States citizen, not me. Resident, not me. Da-da-da-da-da. Whatever it is, you need to clarify. Causes or participates in fraud. Conceals information from the CPA or otherwise misleads the CPA. And through continuous and repeated exposure to the same things over and over, public education, we were indoctrinated to place liabilities on the public record. Where permitted and enforceable, indemnification and hold harmless clauses can provide valuable protection to CPAs. They not only serve as a deterrent against a client considering a potential claim against the CPA, but also can be used to require the client to indemnify the CPA for attorney fees and costs, as well as the costs of judgments or awards arising from claims made against the CPA by third parties. This is why it comes from the trust. Nobody's paying for these claims out of their pocket. They get paid out of the trust. In addition to indemnification or hold harmless clauses, some CPAs use limitation of liability clauses, which typically limit the CPA's liability to a portion of their fee or a defined dollar value. So we're giving them equal consideration for those fees and everything, for their performance. That's the payment part of the contract. They have a performance and a payment. You're going to place the bid up there, like I said one time before, or several times. If they've got $75 million bond, you up the bid, you up the ante, you double them up. I see your $75 million, I'm going to double you. Fold. They're not going to create any kind of liability. They're not going to want to play games with you anymore. Can you use them in your engagement letters? This is like a letter of credence where you want to engage in this system. That's a diplomatic letter of notice. Give them notice that you're going to engage in things. The answer is yes, except when prohibited by applicable law, regulation, or ethic rules. The SEC, federal banking regulators, and many state insurance departments prohibit indemnification or limitation of liability arrangements between the regulated entities and CPA firms. Regulated entities performing audit or other attest services. So we have protest, contest, and attest. According to the AICPA Ethics Interpretation 501-8, use of indemnification and liability limitation clauses disregarding the rules and requirements of regulators would be considered an ethics violation. So what we're doing here is we're not disregarding the rules and requirements of regulators. We're going to hold them to it. Why would you release them of their obligation in sticking to the regulations that apply to them? It's a matter of understanding they're dealing with unregistered securities and they don't have a right to do so. They don't have a true power of attorney to just imply that that unqualified signature means that it's qualified. As a result, when considering the use of indemnification and liability limitation clauses in an audit or other attest engagement letter, if the client is in a regulated industry, check for regulatory rules prohibiting the use of these clauses. So the prohibition of the use of those clauses is only if you're in a regulated industry. Again, if you're coming in as third-party benefactor, it's simply customer agrees to make third-party payment so long as it's understood that credit is given to the customer's account. Check for AICPA ethics rules also apply. This is why I went to that public service as a public trust, and they have a basic obligation of public service, and it's to be ethical to themselves. They're supposed to be introspective and look at their own actions and criticize themselves if they're doing something wrong, knowing in their heart whether what they're doing is right or wrong. And they won't. I'm just doing my job. I don't care if what I'm doing is wrong in your eyes. I'm just doing my job. My boss told me to do this. Well, what does it say in your heart? That doesn't matter. With respect to indemnification and limitation liability clauses, an AICP ethics ruling indicates that clauses which limit liability resulting from knowing misrepresentations by client engagement do not impair independence. This is saying that if you don't know, then you just don't know. You can still go on with that agreement. But once it becomes known, you have that severability. without liability still. And that's their thing. They're saying, no, you can't use severability. You have a liability now. You didn't qualify your signature. You have a liability now. No, that's still a false or representation or a mistake. You cannot hold me culpable as a trustee if I didn't know I was acting in a trust capacity while I was being convicted of a traffic citation as if I was a criminal. Accordingly, that's why it's so important to learn these contracts and trust formations so you can understand what they're doing with that civil jurisdiction. Accordingly, if indemnification clauses are limited in this manner and are not prohibited by regulation, they are permissible in engagement letters for attest services. In other words, being outside of that judicial scope, there's not a limitation on us, with exception to the ethics. We have to be ethical ourselves when we place any kind of limitation clauses. For liability, this says we have to know what we're doing. We can't just make an ambiguous claim of unlimited liabilities and say we're not going to be liable for anything. We have to admit that there's a certain culpability of bringing forth that ethical matter of being careful to maintain good works. That means you don't just start signing things without knowing what you're doing. Every form, you're reading it and not implying anything. You sound like you know what you're talking about because you've been mindful of it. This is a sound mind, a discussion. Go ahead.
Everything you're talking about is common law and Uniform Commercial Code. The thing where the twist comes is they've created the statutes to mirror common law and equity. So it's mirroring, but this is where they twist it and they literally take it and start abusing the shit out of you. And that's the hardest part for most people to understand, is that because this all sounds reasonable, logical, decent, honorable business. That's equity, because equity just means fair. But when they throw the statutes in and you're jumping in their jurisdiction, which again, it looks just like it until they become the trustee and then they become the abuser. At least that's what I've experienced in my walk with all of this stuff, because they say this is what they're going to do, but they don't do it. So keep in mind that's the layers of trust that I keep trying to break out, is that the public trust, which is the government, that public trust is what they manipulate and control. And that's under military control.
And that's why I say that C.O.W.A.R.D.S trust, that's what we're talking about with the birth certificate. When the commanding officer shall cause receipts to be issued, the spoliated owner may use them to obtain indemnity. And that's what that birth certificate is. It's from the governor and his registrar under a seal proving, full faith and credit of the United States. And Joe Cool, if you're still down there, please come back. I missed you. Didn't see you back there. So as we continue on, it says for non-attest services, there are typically no restrictions on the use of indemnification and liability limitation clauses in engagement letters. These are the terms in those clauses are subject to negotiation between the CPA and the client. While CPAs usually prefer the use of such clauses, they often face resistance from their clients. So it's necessary to explain the rationale for using those clauses to clients. For example, in engagements to prepare a compilation report for management use only, you can explain that because your work product is intended solely for their use, your firm should not be responsible for claims arising from use by others. This is the same thing with the disclaimer of a copyright. Notice the disclaimer of the copyright of the UPU. It says various different things, saying they're not responsible for third-party claims. And that's what we're talking about here. They're not responsible for a third-party claim. So what you do is you make that third-party claim right up front. As third party, I'm paying for this shit, so long as it's understood that credit's given to my account. That's your indemnification. They know the instrument is what's funding it. Now you do. Put the value into it. Hey, I'm going to pay all you guys across the board. I'm even going to give you a tip, 10%. That's my tax. That's what a TIV is. It's a gift. Remember, folks, I used to do sales and marketing contracts for 10 years. And I didn't pay taxes as an independent contractor through the IRS. I paid them directly to the local organizations through the contracts. That's what we're doing, is we're learning how these contract clauses work. Santa Claus. Additionally, many states that have adopted, again, there's that term, adopted, a strict privity standard that prohibits third-party lawsuits against a CPA firm unless there's evidence to show that the firm was aware that its work product would be provided to that third party. In the non-attest engagement letter, you can both restrict the use and distribution of work product. Sorry, you can't distribute that name without me giving you permission. Guess what? That's your private placement. You can both restrict the use and distribution. Instead of being an initial public offering as a corporate entity, it's a private placement in trust. And include an indemnification clause applicable to claims made by third parties. If the client gives your work product to a third party without your consent and the third party later files a claim against you, you will have afforded your firm a valuable defense, and in addition, the client will be required to indemnify you in connection with any expenses and costs associated with that claim. It's telling you, you now have that defense. Why wouldn't I not do this? This is my defense. If you want equity, you must first come with equity. If you want to fend off something before it hits you, you've got to do it first. You've got to be wise to it. To defeat one's opponent without fighting is of supreme excellence. So you make your declaration and make it very succinct. Are they legally enforceable? In addition to ensuring that you can use indemnification liability limitation clauses in an engagement letter without violating applicable laws, regulations, or ethics rules, you need to know whether such clauses are enforceable in the applicable jurisdiction. The enforceability of such clauses is often a question of equity and public policy, subject to the dictates of the controlling legal jurisdiction. In many jurisdictions, an important enforceability factor is the ability to show that such clauses were negotiated between two parties with relatively equal bargaining power, and that the clauses were clearly set forth in the engagement letter and understood and consented by both parties to the agreement.
That's equity. That's equity, equity, equity. And that's where you got to scream it from the top of the trees, because when you fall into their jurisdiction, that's not equity. It references jurisdiction after jurisdiction. And the thing that they're not talking about is how oppressive the public jurisdiction is, because they're trespassing, because you have your jurisdiction over your name. That's what you have jurisdiction of. They don't want you really knowing that. They want you believing that the public has the jurisdiction over your name. And if you don't define your equitable jurisdiction, you will not get equity, because they presume and take your equitable position and force you into adhesive contracts. So that's a very critical understanding. And really, because all of it, like he said, it all goes back to insurance.
Yeah, it's just the same thing as the separation of powers clause in the Constitution. You see, everything correlates and corresponds throughout the jurisdictions. The law is uniform throughout all jurisdictions. So here we have the separation of powers clause in the Constitution, which is the trust indenture for the United States and its public officials. That's a contract form in trust. And it's saying the same thing. There's got to be a separation of powers. You're obligated for this. I'm obligated for this. Any third parties? Not party to it. Sorry. You can't make a false. And that's what they're doing. It's like a third party claim against the estate, but that estate, in this sense, is still operable under the trade name of the United States. Engage the client in a frank, upfront discussion about the concept of equitable risk allocation and document it in your client and engagement acceptance file. You may point out to the client that without indemnification, hold harmless, and liability limitation clauses, your fees will be higher to compensate for the elevated risk. Consult with your attorney about both the extent and wording of such clauses prior to presenting them to clients. Depending on the advice of your attorney, you may be able to offer your services for different fees with and without such clauses.
That is clear instructions from the public realm. They're talking to you from your public jurisdiction. They are not talking, just the fact they said attorney tells you they're trying to get you to submit to the public jurisdiction. When if you're in your equitable jurisdiction, you just need to stand your ground and stand with your equitable rights.
Correct. And remember, folks, even in all this stuff that I'm going through and researching and hopefully explaining to you, these people will tell you that you have to make that declaration of trust. I'm going to tell you, no, you don't. You can have it in your mind and heart and know it well enough that it can be made on the spot. And that's truly the epitome of defeating your opponent without fighting. They come at you expecting that you don't know anything because they don't find any declaration of trust. Well, let's draw one up. That's power, folks. That is the pen is mightier than the sword on the spot. It beats the fighting. I'm not saying to do that. I'm saying if you get to that point, then you can do that. In the meantime, it's wise to learn how to make this stuff. Go ahead.
That's where I say that spiritual foundation is so important.
Yeah, it's you've got to have the ability to rightly divide the word of truth, and that's to know these indemnification clauses. If you're gonna let no tongue prosper and rise up against those that make judgment against you, then you better damn know what those judgments are, and that's the judgment of their definitions.
Your spiritual self is know thyself and know your relationship with God. When you know that, you just stand on that. And it's easier said than done because they're going to talk you out of it. And because they've conditioned us with the education system, television, and everything else they do, they get you to stand out of your connection with God to submit to theirs. And they're really good at it. Just know they're really good at it. So for you standing your conviction is tough. But in order to be a soldier of God, that's what you have to be.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And it says here, providing the client with the option may serve as evidence that the clauses were negotiated and not forced upon the client. Okay? That's why it's important to have them so that you can show that it was negotiated. Can you indemnify your client? Another question often raised by CPAs is whether they can indemnify or defend their client for damages, losses, or costs incurred by the client relating to their services if requested by the client. This typically occurs when government entity presents a contract to a CPA firm covering proposed services. Under AICPA Ethics Ruling 102, indemnification of a client. Indemnifying the client for damages, losses, or costs arising from lawsuits, claims, or settlements that relate directly or indirectly to client acts impairs independence. Indemnifying the client for damages, losses, or costs arising from lawsuits, claims, or settlements that relate directly or indirectly to clients' acts acts impairs independence. So they're saying the indemnification is going to impair their independence. If a client requests such provision in connection with non-attest engagements, consult your professional liability insurance agent prior to entering into agreement, as most professional liability policies exclude coverage for liability assumed when entering into a professional services agreement. So this is why you have to provide your own indemnification. And again, that birth certificate is qualified for that. All you got to do is put your directive. Additionally, always consult your attorney prior to entering into any agreement to indemnify, defend, or hold harmless another party in connection with your professional services. With your professional services. I'm not providing services. I'm qualifying the indemnification because their services have a track record of causing loss, damage, and harm to me through a corporate entity that is a known conversion. Summary. Where permissible, CPAs should consider using indemnification, hold harmless, and limitation liability clauses in engagement letters to limit their liability to clients and third parties. So what we're talking about here in the summary is that we're going to give them an engagement letter. Letter of indemnification. It's just letting them know, giving them notice to limit their liability to clients and third parties. As third party, customer agrees to make third party payment as that third party, so long as it's understood that credit is given to the customer's account. No single clause or wording is appropriate in all situations. This is why it's important to learn the language, because you have to be able to write your own. You have to be able to make your yay, and your nay, according to your firsthand experiences and qualifications. Instead, clauses should be tailored to fit individual client situations and the assessed risks. It's telling us one by one. You can't do this as a group. I can do it singularly and then bring other people into the trust as beneficiaries to teach them, and then they have to go establish this same thing for themselves. I can't do it for you. I can explain it to you. I can't comprehend it for you. You have to do this yourself, no matter what, folks. As noted above, the enforceability of indemnification and limitation of liability clauses differs among legal jurisdictions. In certain locales, specific wording may be needed for the clause to be legally binding. CPAs contemplating the use of such clauses in engagement letters should consult with their attorney regarding both the wording to be used and enforceability under applicable law. Again, we're talking about the common law as the gateway to equity, because it was merged with common law, and our ability to make our own contracts, our ultimate right of contract, for the mistake in the contracts that were implied and then adhered to, even though I wasn't qualified.
That last clause is all to get you in the public. So you need to do all of those things, but you can do it in equity. You don't have to get your lawyer. You don't have to get all the jurisdictions down. You just have to know the local rules for which they're going to acknowledge. Because again, these are the C.O.W.A.R.D.S is a government created entity. Therefore, the local rules do have some level of jurisdiction. They don't have full, but they have some. So you have to acknowledge them because they're not going to proceed. This is exactly what I'm going through right now. I'm in probate, got the case. I'm literally dealing with the situation of the local rules, which is what they keep tying my shoes with every time I take a step. So just know that what happens to me in my town does not necessarily is going to happen to you in your town. But do know they're going to adjust and adapt the rules based on how successful anybody gets. But it's all good knowledge to understand true indemnification and how it works.
again, all the more reason I think the power lies in the spiritual foundation, because the stronger that is, there's nothing they can do to come against that.
Well, yeah, but you have to understand too, when we talk about that spiritual foundation, it's not just the spiritual foundation. It's a good comprehension of that spiritual foundation and how that trust and equity works. Because I know a lot of people out here that have a good foundation in spirit, but don't really know the scriptures too well or why they're there, and they use it as a belief system still. And I think that's an error.
I think the scriptures in the spiritual foundation is knowing your base. When you know where you're coming from, you learn how to move. And learning how to move is the path of energy. So you have to be able to alternate your currents, stop your currents, and then redirect them if necessary, because movement is everything. That's how the system works. And they control your energy in the public space. And the art of what we're doing is figuring out how to control private and public. So they don't make it easy. It is very difficult because they don't teach commerce. They teach business. We need to learn commerce.
And what Steve's talking about there is the emotion part. You got to learn to control your emotions through reason and logic. And that's not to say cupcake or anything like that, but like I've said many times, you have to have a certain level of animosity or anger when it comes to certain things. And you have to be able to put that forward. And I like to think of it more as blunt truth, because people just don't like blunt truth. And this is where I get a lot of comments about being so blunt sometimes. We're all big boys and girls. It's time to act like it. And that's the main problem I see. A lot of people just don't want to act like full-grown adults. They still think it's some kind of American dream where they get to live out their dream. This isn't dream time, boys and girls.
I think you got to know that this shit costs something. You're not going to get this stuff without paying a price. We're rocked into a spell from the moment we get here of, you just do these things and you're going to have a comfortable life. And then most of us get some level of comfort and then we relax. And the reality is the kings are the ones that strive through whatever adversity comes their way, because they get a vision for what their life is to be, and then they go after it. Well, guess what? Your vision wasn't thought up by the people that are running the public space. So they don't want your vision. They want their vision. So you're their servant until you figure out how to get free. And it's up to you on how free you want to be. It's going to cost you something. It ain't cheap.
Yep, and it matters about how you go about that too. You know, it's like I said 8 years ago when I was in that courtroom, I was doing a lot of flinging shit at the wall, hoping something would stick, and that's not going to work, guys. You have to have a better motivation, a deeper mindset on making things right and not being just and reconciled and rewarded, or having things returned to you. It's still that materialistic concept. So the deepest base that we were talking about, that spirituality, has to remain there and has to be the driving force. You know, that was part of my problem in the beginning, wanting to go after these people. That was one of the things that was preventing me from doing the research I needed to make things right, so that if I did get some kind of compensation, it would come there. It's like keeping your ducks in a row and making sure that you do this thing first before you get the respect and the money, like Paul talks about. It's the same concept. If you want equity, you got to come with equity first. And I'm telling you what, equity imputes an intent to fulfill an obligation. So get ready and make sure that you got a big job ahead of you, so that when you're done, people can say, yeah, I'll be damned, he did.
And the thing is when you're proceeding with your spiritual balance, what I say is that I think it's peace. You have to operate with peace, because they're treating us as belligerents. So they want you to be mad. They want you to get upset. They want you to lash out and be angry. And when they do certain things that are just ridiculously stupid, everybody's going to the DMV and they do it big time. Like, what the hell are you talking about? Every time IRS, anytime you're dealing with their public entities, they're trying to piss you off so they can call you belligerent. And as soon as they call you belligerent, they don't have to listen to you anymore. You don't have to do what you say because you're a belligerent individual. But if you've got control of your emotions and you're able to settle and be in peace, regardless of how dumb the shit they say to you is, then they're in a challenging place because you understand your equity and that you're not allowing them to alter your emotional state, being that you keeps you in control of you. So now they can't say you're belligerent because you're connected to your God, because you're able to have peace in the chaos that they're throwing at you. So you're absolutely correct to have spiritual grounding. And again, it's all about current. It's electricity and how it moves.
Currency's flowing.
Yeah, you have to remain neutral until the flow is right for you. So get it at your frequency, at your rate, so your voltage and your amplification, and then move it the way you can move it. That is the true power of God, is to be able to control the energy that comes to you. And then you utilize it for what your vision is and how you're going to be.
Okay, I pulled up that the people versus Rose, and it says the people, plaintiff and respondent versus Ronald Forrest Rose, defendant and appellant, da 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 da. It says not to be published. Santa Clara County. It looks like it was published. Elia J. On July 19, 2007, without trial and after stating that Ronald Rose previously had been found to be a sexually violent predator, the Superior Court ordered Ronald Rose to remain committed as an SVP for an indeterminate term under the new provisions of the Sexually Violent Predator Act. The court determined that the new law, which now provides for an indeterminate term of commitment, retroactively applied it to his original commitment. On appeal, Appellant Rose contends that the new law was not intended to apply retroactively and also challenges the commitment on numerous constitutional and other grounds. I don't know what this has to do with indemnification, California mental health for a 2-year term. I wonder if he was referencing it to a revocable trust that could be changed. Huh. Well, I'll have to look at this and read it good myself. In the meantime, what do you guys think? You guys think you can handle a simple declaration of trust? It doesn't sound like it's too hard. So I'm going to do some more investigation. Like I said, I've got a certificate of trust, and it's just a matter of basically knowing how a trust is supposed to operate, giving it its intent, and then naming the officers and their duties.
And I already got one in probate.
How can you have a certificate of trust without a declaration?
When you go to probate, you have to write a declaration to even get in there.
Right. You got to have a declaration of trust to get into probate. I was talking specifically earlier, if they want to know of a trust, you give them a certificate of trust. Say I go down to the bank, I can give them a certificate of trust. I've already got a declaration of trust drawn up.
That's how you
but I can
the
give
private elements of a private trust private, but
right,
yeah,
and that's what they talked about, the privity. So I can just draw up a new declaration of trust on the spot by negotiating with the banker what he requires for a declaration of trust.
So is that practical or theoretical?
Theoretical right now, but hopefully I will be able to prove it to be practical. Like I said, I intend to open up a trust account with the local credit union.
And I'm really into this stuff, but I hate to like say it, it's just like if you can't get me to follow along, I don't know how you can expect most people to really transition into this way of living without a clear path, because it spells trouble for a lot of people, because most people can't really discern. We're trying to interpret law and stuff, and then theoretically apply that.
Right, and that's why I say everything's supposed to be a negotiable instrument. So just sit down and negotiate, and that's the basic intent of a normal trust is education, not actually commerce. It's a matter of educating the other members of the trust and the beneficiaries a protection, and that again is through the knowledge, knowing what's what, who's whose, and keeping it separate.
Well, I think I get where you're coming from in that what can I do right now? Right now, you
Right.
could go and create your own private trust, registered in a bank, and have a trust. And you can start titling your property to that trust without having to go to probate or any of that stuff. You could go create your own private trust. You just got literally go to IRS.gov and create a EIN for your private trust. And when you create your EIN for your trust, then you go to the bank and say, this is my private trust, and I want this. And you got to give them, you don't have to give them your full declarations and stuff. You can just give them
the certificate.
They need to know. They need to know the rights of succession. In that, where do you want us to be the trustee, or do you already have trustees? And they need that clear definition of where they pass it off. So in the event you die, it goes to who and who manages it. So they just need to know your administrative process. That's all it takes to open a trust account.
I get that part. Yeah, but I think where we're maybe losing a lot of people, or where I'm getting lost, I guess I should speak for myself, is, I get that part, and the practical applications of these concepts. But where I get lost, or the water gets muddied when we start theorizing of how this should work. And I think for the sake of the people, if we're going to be teaching people these sort of concepts, it would help to not flood them with information and show them what does work, and maybe stick with that. But
That's right, and that's why I say as I go forth and I get this account set up, I'll be showing everybody, and that's a matter of negotiating with the banker himself. So it's going to be a new declaration of trust other than what I've already got, and in that, it's just declaring that we're going to negotiate so that we can learn from each other, because I know he has certain elements he knows about, I have certain elements I know about, and in that, we're not going to accuse each other, we're going to research each other to make sure that we do agree. That's all we're doing.
Yeah.
And so hopefully soon I'll be able to show you that practical process. And that's just a matter of having a Socratic discussion with them, learning from each other.
That
would also come to careful to maintain good works on both sides of that negotiation.
Yep.
It's being faithful that Satan's going to act right because you asked him to, though, also, from my perspective.
Well, it's a matter of paying them. See, anybody's willing to be paid, right? And like it said in there, they're going to take a smaller pay if they're indemnified. They're going to charge you more if you don't indemnify them. If there's unlimited credits, tell you what, dude, I'm going to let you keep that higher pay and indemnify you. I'm going to give you motivation to do it.
Right. If they accept the trustee position, then certainly they're entitled to something. But
right.
I'll tell you in a heartbeat, they don't want to take the trustee position you're offering, because that means you know how the system really works, and they're not going to want you. That's what I've gone through.
Yeah.
What I talk about is what I've done. So when I'm saying, and I know you can say, the thing is you understand a couple things. You have to understand good and evil are always together. They're never separated. It's the yin and the yang.
They are separate, but they balance each other out.
It's the yin and the yang.
If you're looking at them, they are a part of the whole, but the whole is beyond our ability to comprehend.
Well, that's the part we have to begin to understand, is that you're going to have some good, but you got some bad coming with it. Now, the thing we can learn is how to flip the polarity so we can control what's when and where the stuff is dispersed. So again, it's all about us remaining neutral, which is what I keep talking about in maintaining peace. Because when you're at peace, you're neutral. You are neither positive nor negative. You only flip when you need to. And that's the art of where we're going as far as this ascension of understanding and controlling our universe.
Well, my understanding of how energy works is different, but I mean, I understand what you keep repeating that concept, but I mean, I understand it to be slightly different. I mean, I don't think you can be neutral. I think neutral is a harmonic balance of the positive and negative, and we are going to experience both, and we strive to achieve that balance. But we're never going to maintain that balance perfectly.
No, you're not going to stay there indefinitely. You can't, because the
Right.
energy's flowing, it's going to get it backed up. You get increase amperage, and at some point, you have no choice but to move because the energy is going to move through you, whether you want it to or not. So, I don't have all the answers. I just know everything I've done with my own ass. So I don't speak to much that I haven't done. And the concepts that he's talking about with indemnification, I've written some of those concepts into much of my work. I'm in probate, but I'm not dead. So the things I've done have moved the needle because it tells me that there is remedy. But getting the remedy is really fucking hard. Let's make that crystal clear. But there are things you can do that make your life a little easier, especially if you start understanding private trust. Because when you're in a private trust, then there's not, I mean, they're going to try to get you to report to them, but you don't have to. As long as you don't bring those assets out of the private trust into the public, you don't have to report shit. But you can leverage the assets through the trust. And when you leverage the assets, you have to attest for their value. So then you have to give notice of what the assets are. And that's an element that this is how rich people do it. They have assets in a trust and it's not in their name. So you go through a divorce, somebody sues you, whatever, you don't own anything. The trust owns it all. So they got to know the name of the trust to even get to you, to get to the asset. And if you're indemnified, if you've already indemnified all the people in place between you and your asset, then they got an incentive to protect you because they're getting paid and they have fees coming to them. So that's how it all starts to apply together when you start understanding it. It's just what assets do you have
that prevents that third party from intervening so they can come at you and file a suit because they falsely used your name or property, whatever. That's a prevention of that.
And sure, how I translate that. Sorry, Russ, but I just want to kind of summarize, just to make sure I got the concept correct. It's like just me registering the property or whatever it gives them the right to administer that property and do what they do. And so by me appropriately managing those assets, that doesn't give them
right. It prevents them from being able to take that instrument and calling it an asset on their books, so that they can turn around and then sell their asset. You're selling our asset.
That doesn't kill the beast, but
right.
I think some level of evil is necessary. But that, to me, it harmonically balances out that ledger or whatever it makes things more equitable. And that's where things are all out of balance, out of whack, and why we see all this chaos is we're just basically shorting out and freaking out or whatever.
Yeah, it seems kind of ironic to me that the settler, what appears to be the one, would be the one that is settled in presentment.
Settled in presentment.
Well, I mean, the whole foundation of the financial side of the paperwork, careful to maintain good works, that's the presentment on the paper.
Right. You're talking about the integrity of the record. So the settled one,
and that goes back to the spiritual side.
Right, is the one that can recognize the record is an error, and it's an error because of the values that you put into it. You didn't mean to put that value into that record that really doesn't have any value to begin with. Now that you realized it's caused liabilities, that value is a debt value.
See, so there's kind of like, because your name is in the public space and they claim that as part of the public ownership, that's where they start putting liens, fines, fees, and stuff against that name. If that name owns nothing, put all the liens, fines, and fees you want to, because the name owns nothing.
Right.
All assets are moved to a private trust. Now they have to bring proper claim to show that the trust is liable. So,
and that's that United States business, United States citizenship. Everybody's born into this business or birthed into this business, and nobody's ever taught.
Yeah, we're just taught to be servants, put stuff in your name. And you can, when you originally purchase it, put it in your name. That's fine. But at some point, transfer the title to your trust, especially if it's an asset. If you inherit something from your parents, by all means, say you inherit your parents' home. Well, your name was the benefactor on their trust. When that probate settles, you got the title to the property. Now go retitle the property on a quick claim deed to put that property in your trust name. So now when you don't file taxes for 5 years and they say, we're going to take your property, go ahead. Because you're going to come after the name, and the name owns nothing. But you're a benefactor of that estate. That estate is not subject to your jurisdiction. So this is learning how to protect assets, number one. And like the guy said, you got to get the assets first. So that's the other part of getting control of the name. Because once you can get control of the name, then you can start really acquiring assets to put in the trust. And that's where I'm at. I'm trying to control the name so that I can get the assets to put in the trust, so I can teach people how to operate in this chaotic mess, because it's an absolute mess, and it's built on purpose to keep us confused so we can't find our ass from our elbows. That's the whole purpose of this shit.
Yeah, the same with legalese. It's meant to confuse the common layman.
Seems the common law, the common lore has been twisted in as a lure in their fishing nets.
Oh yeah. When I tell you evil genius, that's exactly what we're dealing with. So do not underestimate this opponent. The art of deception is their number one weapon, and they are great at it because they do it.
Oh yeah.
Question everything.
Yeah, Edward Mandell House, his letter to Woodrow Wilson. You know, this is planned. So we have to think about that. But at the same time, we got to remember a lot of these public officials don't really know what they're doing. Steve happens to evidently have a group of people that know exactly what they're doing, and they're fighting him every leg of the way.
They had to learn because I pushed them. Because I came at them with stuff that they didn't know what to do with. So they had to ask their superiors and people that, this is the thing I see in the whole process. Like when I first started going to my county, the clerk knew everything. Everybody came to her. She knew everything. Her office was flooded with people. And then the next clerk, not so many people came to her. And then she shut down. And then the third clerk, don't really nobody go to her.
Yeah, and that's what I mentioned in the my talk to city council this last time, is that when we lose people in public official capacity like that have held that office for a long time, somebody new comes in, and somehow we've lost some of that knowledge because the younger new person comes in isn't quite as informed as the old guy, and that information doesn't get passed on.
Absolutely. And then they're purposefully dumbing them down, but they're still having the same liability for that public office. But they don't understand what that liability is because nobody's informed them. And consequently, I wind up talking to their attorneys as opposed to talking to the public official. And I tell their attorneys, you're not obligated to tell me shit, and I'm not obligated to listen to you. I need to speak with the public official because that's the person that has the oath of office.
Yeah, and they're the executive.
Yeah. So whoever your representatives are, I don't give a shit. I'm not here to talk to them. I'm here to talk to the person that has the oath of office. Henceforth, now I'm going to put liens against all of them because they have bonds and they have the obligation to perform. So learning how to challenge the system, and that's the reality, is the sickest part about it is just how, what's a cognitive dissonance that the people have. Because when you present the hard facts, what I try to tell, where I'm at with a lot of people close to me, is I'm literally saying to them, I am in probate, but I'm not dead. I've got an explanation on how I'm there. Can you find one? And nobody can find anything. And I had a family member actually go to the clerk and ask, why is he in probate? And the clerk told him, I don't know. And it's like, you're over the probate court. Isn't it your duty to know? And crickets. Because everybody's here to keep the game alive. But when the people actually return to the understanding of what it is to truly self-govern, that's when their power is gone.
And that's what they're afraid of.
All I'm walking with is the truth. So I'm not afraid of anybody right now because they got to have their lies, but all I got is the truth. And it's like, you tell me, why am I here? If I'm wrong, I shouldn't be here. But
at what point do you point the finger at yourself for failure to communicate effectively to get these people to recognize what's true and right?
I mean, I point my finger at myself every day, but I can't make people do their job. I can only inspire and influence.
That's the hurdle that I have run into. And I don't want to give people false hope that going down this path will result in something, glorious.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from there too, and I'm guilty of the same thing, Mitch. But I have to have faith because I am the one that's going through this. Like Steve, he's the one that's been going through this, so he has faith, and I don't think he's trying to push any false hope on anyone. Neither am I, and it is a terrible path to have to try to figure out. I assure you, but I have nothing else left in my life, so I'm going to keep going at it. And for myself, I have faith, and I hope the best, so that I can show others that practicality you were talking about earlier.
And you got my support. Sorry, Steve. I just want to say real quick. You got my support, man, and I'm your biggest fan. I really am. I'm cheering for you guys. I just don't, have the energy or the situation to be able to manage what you guys are doing. So thank you for what you're doing. I think it's completely necessary. That's all.
I can agree. It's hard to have an office in your car, Mitch. I agree.
The thing is that when you see, for me, and I said this quite a few times, and I get this from my family, they say I'm a narcissist. And I say to them that I got a vision. God told me to do this. And they're like, God didn't tell you shit. It's like, well, that's my connection, not yours. And that's my calling, not yours. So each person hears the word their own way. And the thing I say is that there's a visionary and there's a narcissist. And they're very similar. And this is how I explain it. In that the visionary thinks can play like Michael Jordan. I got some game. I'm 6'5". I can run a little bit. I can shoot a J. I think if I keep working at it, I'll play and probably be right up there with Michael Jordan. And then the narcissist says, I am Michael Jordan. I got all the skill. I got all the talent. I got everything. I look just like him. I'm Michael Jordan. And what happens is the narcissist enters the game and says, Scotty, pass me the ball. It's like, bro, you slow as shit. Bro, you don't handle the ball worth a fuck. Man, you can't shoot at all. Man, that's bullshit. The ball's flat. The ref's doing something against me. It's your fault. You don't want to pass me the ball. Coach don't like me like he. Like, wait a minute. Are you Michael Jordan? Or are you trying to be like Michael? The visionary understands and is accountable. I got these skills, but I'm missing these skills. So I'm going to continue to work, practice, look at my film, be honest with myself, because I have a vision. And because my vision is to be as good, if not better than him, I'm going to work my ass off to do it. Whereas the narcissist already thinks they made it. And they haven't done any of the work to get there. They haven't done anything other than in their mind, they think they're there, and they don't have any evidence of it. So when you talk to a narcissist about what they're doing, they can't talk. They don't want to talk. They get mad. They get inflamed because it's like, why don't you think I'm the greatest basketball player ever playing the game? Because I do. So these are the dichotomies of life that we keep going through. And it's only through my experience that I've gotten to this point, because I understand I don't know everything. But what I do know is you can't stop my work ethic, because I'm going to outwork the shit out of it. Whatever I got to do, whatever the challenge is, I'm going to outwork it. And
and that's that thing about getting through this stuff, you know.
Yeah,
like I said, I don't have anything left in my life, so I'm going to get through this one way or another. And if not, it's going to be me spending the rest of my life trying to figure it out. I think it's right, and I don't think I'm doing anything wrong in trying to learn it. So,
and
that's me as well.
Finding like minds is hard, especially with so much confusion and chaos put out there. Finding people who are pure of spirit, pure of mind, pure of soul, to try to say, hey, I don't want this just for me. I want people to have a better life. Because when you start seeing this bullshit like I see it's bullshit, you want to, like, this got to stop. And you're not going to unsee it, because it's not going to stop. And every day that you go through your life, you're like, damn, that's another layer of bullshit that just keeps going by. There's another person shot for no reason. There's another person losing their home for no reason. It's like you go out here and you try to be successful in life, and you got the illusions that these doors are open for you and equal opportunity exists. That's a bunch of horse shit.
yeah, we've got enough homes for every man, woman, and child on the American soil anyway, and yet we have quite a few thousands of homeless people. I don't understand that. All kinds of vacant properties that could use some good maintenance and hard workers, and all kinds of them out there homeless, but nobody seems to find a solution to that. I mean, it's two different sides of a fence that both have a problem, and they're a solution for each other. Nobody else sees this. Of course they see it, but that would be too easy to help the people understand how this system works. They need that division. They need that desperation and that quagmire of low self-esteem and classifications and separations, because that's what keeps them at the top
and keeps us in chaos, because they want to give you the illusion of the American dream, but they do everything they can to stop it. Why do you even fight with your government at all? If you're working and you're doing the best you can to raise your family, why do you have to fight about taxes?
Exactly.
This should not be a fight. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't pay a month. Here you go. Because I got abundance, I'm good. But you won't let me have abundance. You don't want me opening my businesses. You don't want me building 50 homes. You don't want me because it's not on your agenda. But when I call it out, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. You just don't want this. You just don't want that. No, I want success. And that's what I understand success to be, is that when I dream of, owning 50 laundromats, I want to own 50 laundromats. Why can't I own 50 laundromats? There should be nothing. Open competition, free market. That's what we should be in, but we're not.
Well, and one of the funny things too, Steve, is if you understand how the credit system works, I'll be damned if that wouldn't be something I might try, as opening a laundromat, but it would be a free laundromat. Of course, you'd pay somebody to supervise it, but the patrons would be able to because everything works on a credit system anyway.
Yeah.
The coolest laundromat I ever been to had a shower in it. I'm just saying.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
But like I said, I mean, everybody, again, you find your path, you find what God's calling you to do, you find your purpose, and your soul will be complete. I know my adventure has cost me a lot, but my soul is clean. I have no regrets other than the people that don't understand. And my prayer is that once I cross the finish line, that everyone begins to understand. Because when you see a wrong and you walk past it, you are twice as guilty as the person that committed it. If I watch somebody stabbed in the street,
Agreed.
if I don't interrupt or at least tell them, I am twice as guilty as the person that did it.
Yep.
And that's what I've seen in this process and in this system, is that it's completely and totally corrupt. And evil is allowed to operate with impunity. All you got to do is go to a hearing when there are traffic tickets. Just go sit there and listen to the bullshit they say. And it's like, God damn, they're just railroading the fuck out of people. And everybody in there's they just want to get out of there. All they want to do is get the fuck out of there because it's bullshit. But they're bullshitting them. Oh, you didn't have a license. Oh, you didn't. Bro, you got me over here at 2:30 in the afternoon when 90% of the people work at that time. And you're threatening to take their license and they need their job to take care of their family. That is horseshit. You're going to hold me up for $150 from caring for my family? That's harassment. That's extortion. That's political.
Yeah, that's
the power.
Yeah, that's what I say is when they're going against third-party benefactors in a public service, which is a public trust, and that is extortion at the greatest. You either do this or we're going to put you in jail. That's extortion.
And unlawful detainment, because the crime is only
kidnapping.
Crime is only a crime when you damage person or damage property.
Yep.
That's constitutional. It's not when I don't have a license or was driving on the wrong side of the street. As long as nobody was hurt, nobody was damaged, give me a citation, give me a fee. Say you shouldn't have did that. But detaining me, that's completely and totally unlawful. But we're so conditioned because they moved, like Keith said, they moved all of the stuff in commerce into their jurisdiction so they could call it crime. And because they call it crime when you're in their jurisdiction, it's crime if you agree. But if you disagree, now it's not crime.
Yeah, see, breach of contract is a criminal offense. So if everything's civil, you're always contracting. If you break that contract, you committed a criminal offense by implication and adhesion contract.
So when you look at, and I look at what my journey's been, God has literally done Mr. Miyagi to me. Paint the fence, sand the floor, wax the car. When I step out and I actually take these applications that Keith is talking about and I start putting them in my life, it's like shit. The shit works. It's not perfect, but it works. And the thing is that everybody just has to get the courage, because that's really what it takes, because the weapon they use is fear. The number one weapon is fear. They got to scare the fuck out of you. And if they scare the fuck out of you, they got you. You're going to lose, because that's where the devil lives. It literally is like the Matrix. They come at you. I had 16 police officers in my house. 100% intimidation.
Yep.
Why the fuck do you need that many people? You don't. You're doing it to scare the fuck out of me. And that's how they operate. This is the kind of shit they do when you actually push them. But I have done nothing wrong. And the reality is you just got to stand in your being. It's like, God's got me.
Yep. That's so true, JG. JG's got a comment down there that says learned helplessness. I mentioned this, the hold no child behind. They're literally saying that children are stupid. Treat them all equally. So the smart ones never get through now.
which is dumb. But they want more servants than they have leaders, because they got all the leaders they want, and they're basically going to inbred their leaders within their cults. And I don't want to speak to any of that shit. I don't know what's true. I don't know what's not true. All I know is the oppression is extraordinarily real. And it's not limited to any one person. It's everybody. And if we don't stand up as people, it's only going to get worse. It is
and they're
better.
Yeah, and they're getting ballsier and ballsier about it. My God, look at Tiffany Henyard over there in Dalton, Illinois. I mean, not only did the FBI step in and subpoena a bunch of things and everything, but she went to the city council meeting. It was the same fucking way. She didn't give a fuck. She dismissed their subpoena. Said, no. It's like she has the ability to consent whether to be sued or not. Maybe she knows something, huh? So, well, it's interesting now that this has come about like this. So I'm even more piqued at watching this and see how it comes out.
So my morals. It's not a perfect scenario. We are under military occupation, like it or not. These are realities we have to accept. If you look at the military handbook, it has how they're operating, how they're able to violate all of your rights. It's all there. There's a diagram I share all the time showing exactly how restitution and reparations are surrounded by nothing but agencies. And the Bar Association, how they take you in and out of each and every agency. It's absolutely criminal, diabolical. It is some evil fucking shit. And again, waking up. That's the first thing, is just to wake up and know that they're pissing down our necks and telling us it's rain.
Yeah, I just did a video on the 81st Congress second session where Congress investigated the Lawyers Guild and determined that by definition they're all communists. Well, the ABA, though it's separate and distinct, and it comprises of the majority of 300 and some thousand attorneys across the United States, but they still operate in the same fashion. It's the same thing with the Republican and Democratic Party. They operate in the same fashion. They're cohorts together. It's all one big political scheme to get us distracted from the communist activities.
But and I'm not even going to even worry about what the political party is. I just look at, you can look up the 12 presumptions of the bar. When you read those, you see how they're bypassing the Constitution. And everybody in the court is a fucking bar associate. So it's a private organization. It's a private association for which they can do. And when they put the hand over the mic and say, counsel approach the bench, that's a private meeting for the bar association. These are the kind of things, it's like when you start really thinking about it, like, wait a minute, these motherfuckers, and if you've ever been in enough court cases, I've been at least 10 traffic tickets and had lawyers, and I promise you it felt like they cut a deal before I walked in. So, I'm just looking at the sheet, the presumption of the record, the presumption of public service, the presumption of public oath, the presumption of immunity, the presumption of summons, the presumption of custody. These are just the basic presumptions they have. And when you actually read them and you see what they're doing, it's like, fuck, if they're walking in there and they're presuming these things, I don't have any constitutional rights. Because if you're represented by a bar associate and the prosecutor's a bar associate and the judge is a bar associate, guess what? You have no rights, sir. And you're stuck. You are stuck. And you too many people go in there. Like I said, just go in there and watch any traffic full ensemble. They're just going to railroad the kids, the people right through there, and everybody's just so conditioned to just keep giving them the money. There you go.
I've got these 12 presumptions pulled up, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll give you the 12 presumptions. First presumption is presumption of public record. That's the one that's in error. Second presumption is presumption of public service. That is the error. We were presumed to be in public service. Presumption of oath. That is another error that we have been under oath. Presumption of immunity. Presumption of immunity is the plausible deniability of liability. There's a presumption of immunity, so they don't have to take on liability. I'm just doing my job. You have to talk to my boss. Maybe he took liability. Presumption of summons. Presumption of custody. Presumption of guardian. Presumption of trustee. Presumption of government as executor and beneficiary. Presumption of agent and agency. Presumption of incompetence, and presumption of guilt. That's a presumption.
They presume
wherein they say you're presumed innocent until proven guilty. This here, under the Roman courts, the presumptions of the Roman courts is the presumption of guilt.
If you're a defendant, you are guilty.
Canon Law 3228. This is tells you where it comes from and goes to, I guess, right?
Law is uniform throughout all jurisdictions. They're going to tell you in each jurisdiction what's going on, and they're going to tell you there's a presumption of immunity. They're going to tell you that there's a presumption of guilt. Yet when you get in that court, oh no, you're presumed innocent until proven guilty. Oh, then why are my only two pleas is guilty or not guilty? Why can't I plead innocent?
Why am I even pleading?
Exactly.
I don't have to plead. I'm standing on my own 2 feet. But you changed the language. That's why you got Black's Law Dictionary. Can't we just talk out of Webster's? You got another dictionary just to get me whipped into your fucking contracts.
Yep.
And get me from standing on my own 2 feet in my own land, in my own space with my own God. You have me worshiping yours. It's beyond diabolical. It's beyond evil. It is the worst thing that's ever happened to us. And, you know, the thing is, they built it off of the good. They let everything that's in the public be good first.
Yeah, think about it. You know, we were born in that spell of illness, as I've showed. That's that inpatient hospital treatment. You're born in a hospital under inpatient hospital treatment. That's the definition of spell of illness. And remember, those doctors, they take a Hippocratic oath to Apollo and the Greek gods. Oops. Yes. So anyway, that brings us to the end of our stream tonight. I really want to appreciate Steve for coming up. Mitchell, thank you again. I hope we helped clear out some cobwebs, whatever. Russ, thanks for your input. I hope you're getting to understand trust more as well. And what do you guys got on the way out?
I just want to say thanks to you, Wizard, Steve, 5-Speed, folks in the chat. A lot of good input down there. Yeah, I appreciate you guys leading the way. Thanks for being you. Peace.
You bet. You too, Mitch. Thanks for coming back.
Always appreciate you, Keith, and your platform. Steve as well, everybody in the chat. As always, many blessings and much love.
Absolutely. Thank you again. Yeah, and let's not forget about the people in chat, JG and Joshua Jonio, Imperium Privatus, the tribes down there, Norman Longstaff. Appreciate everybody. And again, thanks for coming, Steve. What do you got? You're gonna let me know tomorrow before you go out so I can know what to expect.
Well, I literally am working on the putting in as executor, because remember I was administrator, and then now they're saying I got to come back as executor. I've already got orders into the case, so I'm gonna go ahead and just file that tonight, and then let me see what happens in the morning once I do that, because I think once I come back as executor, they're saying if that's the private, then I get through.
Right.
That itself should get me through, but I go get those documents. I think that's even more. So I'll let you know in the morning. I'll text you and let you know. But I really hope and pray that everybody just does the soul searching for peace and understanding, because we are more powerful together. We the people is what made this country, not someone just saying I'm the governor or I'm the president. It's us the people. So we have to understand our power in order to utilize it. And I don't like to think of us as leaders. We're just collaborators, understanding that it's the love in our heart that's moving us, and the spirit that's moving us to a better world. So thank everybody for participating. Thank you, Keith, for having this. And I totally appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely, absolutely. And like I said, we've got to learn how to tailor this stuff to our individual selves. And that's what says we have to learn this stuff ourselves. So again, I can explain it to you, but I can't comprehend it for you. So please keep coming back. Do your due diligence. Don't believe me. Don't believe the neighbor. Don't believe the government. For crying out loud, don't believe your mother. Do your research so you know. And then, like Steve said, we can collaborate on it and make sure that what we're discerning is objectively true and feasible. So in that, you guys know me. I love you, but I don't give a rat's ass whether you love me back. So make sure that you understand that's to say, I don't care if you hate me. I don't care if you don't respect me. That's on you. So may God bless you and have a great night. Bye now.